Hi there, this is John Barber, and this is my very last thing I will ever even post on Facebook. I never got on Facebook to do anything social, to make any new friends or anything like that. I was only on Facebook to do my work. And my work to me mainly was to keep America informed about the murder of John Kennedy. I never ever posted anything really personal about. One thing that I'm really proudest of is that I never posted a picture of a cat. Only once, when my wife had a cat sitting on her head, our one-eyed cat named Cy for Cyclops, were watching a President Obama speech and they fell asleep. So to all of you who have read me and encouraged me or even criticized me for this over a dozen and a half years, I thank you from the bottom of my happy heart, and I wish you the two things that could bring you the happiest of lives, and that is to have someone you love, a job you love, or that missing ingredient, good luck. But this is not the reason that I'm putting up this post. As all of you all know, I never give advice. But this is one time I'm going to give advice, and I'm going to give it to Joe Biden, so that I hope Joe Biden, who's been getting the worst advice in the world from his advisors at Camp David, has an advisor who may stumble across this and is smart enough to show it to Joe, or Joe is watching it himself, and I'm going to take the feeling that Joe is watching it himself. Pardon me if I sound a little bit disrespectful by not referring to you as Mr. President. But ever since the Central Intelligence Agency murdered President John F. Kennedy, the best president we've had in 100 years, the only peace president, I have referred to every successor only by their last name. It was Nixon or Reagan or Carter or Bush or Trump or Biden. And you're the Biden. The other thing that I will tell you very honestly, and this country needs as much honesty as it can get, even if it comes from me, I'm 91 years of age. I am 10 years older than you. And I have 1,000 times more energy in me and more anger in me about saving this once amazing democracy. I have no admiration for you whatsoever, which I will get to in a minute. If you could have spoken half as passionately to the American people as I'm speaking to you during that debate with Trump, which was dumb and dumber, Trump would be toast. Instead of your weakness, you have put democracy one flush away from going down the toilet. We do not need two intellectually handicapped idiots arguing about their goddamn golf score. We need now, in this fail-safe moment in America, debates like Lincoln and Douglas talking about things that matter. But no one in this country could love and appreciate this country as passionately as I do. As an abandoned 6-year-old orphan born in the Salvation Army charity ward in Toronto, abandoned at 16, and from the time I was just a child, wanting to become only a citizen of the United States, inspired by seeing Jimmy Stewart and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So inspired that I came here at 17 and was deported, came here again at 20 and was deported, and kept coming and coming until finally I was given my citizenship papers in the mid-70s by Senator John Tunney of California. Now, before I get to the reasons justifiably why I have no admiration for you, just a couple of words about this guy that is giving you the advice that is going to save democracy, if not your job. This is coming to you from a boy and a man whose heroes have been and always will be Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, and John F. Kennedy, I guess along with Jim Garrison and William F. Pepper and Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. At 46 years of age, with my citizenship papers in my pocket in Hollywood, I couldn't get a job because of the intense honesty I expressed as a film critic. Totally unemployable. And yet look what happens in this wonderful country. At 47 the next year, I had the #1 most original, most watched show in the history of television. It was called Real People. And the 3 years that I ran it, from 1979 to 1982, it did more good for this country than did 60 Minutes in 30 years. As a matter of fact, it played a large part in getting that Vietnam Memorial Wall built in Washington, D.C. That story is brilliantly outlined in my book, Your Mother's Not a Virgin, a title inspired by Jim Garrison. And speaking of Mr. Garrison, although Oliver Stone made this most brilliant movie called JFK, which made my documentaries possible, on his deathbed, Mr. Garrison chose me to be his Boswell to tell the story of his solved, sabotaged investigation into the murder of John F. Kennedy. And indeed I did. One is called The Garrison Tapes, the other is called The American Media, and the second assassination of President John F. Kennedy. So that being said, let me get to a few of the reasons why I have no admiration for you, but why you should, like Mark Anthony said, lend me your ears. First of all, it breaks my heart that you are giving, not selling weapons to Netanyahu, to continuing his war criminal murdering of children in a program called gardening. For that, shame on you. But my shame for you goes back to your trashing of Anita Hill, which put that black plague Clarence Thomas in the Supreme Court, who contributed to the democracy-destroying ruling that would make any president a dictator or an imperial or monarch president of the United States. But again, the other thing that really, really disturbed me, in the end of the 70s, the House Select Committee ruled there was a conspiracy to murder John Kennedy and Martin Luther King and turned it over to the Justice Department, where they are both cold cases, and urged the government to look into them, and the government shut the door. And yet Congress ruled a few years later that in October, all the CIA files should be released. And you cowardly backed away from that, as did Trump a year earlier, and said they will never be released. So that is one of the reasons I have no respect for you, along with all the others. I mean, this makes it look as though Trump may indeed become the next president of the United States, and half of my friends are making appointments with Canadian real estate brokers just in case that happens. But this is how you can prevent it from happening. That Supreme Court ruling now shows two things. First off, to say that nobody is above the law is the biggest crock of shit that anybody ever uttered. But what it goes on to do, very, very sadly, is make the President of the United States a dictator, which, of course, Donald Trump says he's going to do on the first day. However, the ruling says that he could still be liable for crimes which he commits as a private citizen. Well, as a private citizen, you saw him, and millions saw him. The world saw him saying and doing this.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down.
As a result of that lie, because he never did accompany his followers to the Senate to try to destroy you becoming president of the United States, it resulted in 4 murders or deaths at the time it was happening, and 4 suicides weeks and months later from 4 of the officers involved. That means there were 8 deaths caused by Donald Trump. So the least that could happen to him, to stick him in Rikers Island, is involuntary manslaughter. But now, for some strange reason, that Supreme Court ruling is being stretched to cover him as a private citizen. So this brings us to something even scarier. You saw, all bodies saw this, and all Americans applauded it. Finally, a brave jury of 12 American men and women in New York City found him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of 34 crimes. And this week, he was supposed to be sentenced. But guess what? This cowardly judge now moves it to September, and he moves it saying, I will reserve my right to sentence in September on the 18th, provided it's necessary. Now, what do you think provided it's necessary means in plain fucking English? It means he may vacate the conviction of that brave American journey, and there'll be another goddamn crime that he gets away with it. So here is what you have to do. You saw him say,
You're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
So, not only will he be a dictator, but any future president of the United States will be a dictator. Which means, Joe, they are not president yet, and neither is Trump. Guess who's president? In case it slipped your mind, you are the president of the United States. So here is what you do. You become dictator for a day. It would only take an hour, actually. And you arrest Donald Trump for the crimes he committed as a private citizen. And you don't arrest him with the police or the FBI. You arrest him with the army. And you throw him Guantanamo. Now, I know where you throw him in Guantanamo because there's no civil recourse for a release. Now, I know it would be cruel and unusual punishment to put this maniac and this psychopath into solitary confinement. So what you have to do is have them joined by 6 of those Supreme Court justices. So like Salieri and Amadeus, he can walk around screaming at them, I am president of the United States. And then guess what happens? The Republican Party will just disappear, and the remnants of them will have to have an open convention. Well, what are they going to find with the remaining Walking Dead or the Stepford Wives? What is going to happen is they're going to have to find a candidate. And the corporations that own this country will make sure they find a candidate, even if they have to dig up Goldwater to prove that other lie to America, that this is a two-party system, which Gore Vidal said 50 and 60 years ago. It definitely is not. Now, what you then do is you retire. This means the Democratic Party also now has to have an open convention. And there are half a dozen really, really decent men and women who could qualify to be president of the United States. I promise you, you do that. Not only will this be the most interesting, the most participated in election in American history, it will be the greatest landslide in history for the Democratic Party. And that's what you will be remembered for saving democracy, if not your job. So now, while a lot of your compatriot Democrats are saying, Joe, you got to go, what you have to do, Joe, is you have got to go and do this. So let's go. Good luck. And God bless, if there is one.